We are very happy that that you're spending your lunch hour with us today. For those of you who don't know, I am Yvonne Schwab, ACG Silicon Valley's new CEO. I'm muting here. ACGSV is Silicon Valley's premier organization for senior executives, providing connections, thought leadership, and enabling personal and organizational growth has been the goal of our now 36-year-old chapter. When I signed on for this role, quite honestly, I had no idea my first event as the CEO would be virtual. Just a few short months ago, we were hosted by our wonderful sponsor, Santa Clara University, in their fabulous Adobe Lodge. At ACGSV, we certainly appreciate all of our generous sponsors. The past few months have been challenging. We were forced to stop all of our face-to-face events. After some reconfiguration, our team at ACGSV, along with our sponsors, is now able to offer you a variety of virtual events in the upcoming months. We invite you to visit our website, acgsv.org, to see the full calendar of upcoming events, including one next Wednesday on how pandemics will impact transportation innovation. I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you and discuss your possible involvement with our chapter in detail. I look forward to getting to know those of you that I don't know yet. My door is always open. Tomorrow, you will receive an invitation to join our LinkedIn group, which we created for all the participants to continue the discussion. After the presentation today, we also invite you to stay on to ask some questions to our panelists. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our panel of experts, Sieglinde van Dam, a business communication strategist and artist extraordinaire, and Olivier Lemignon, principal consultant and HPO coach. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. We're going to share our screen. Let's see here. Tell me if you can see it.
Yes.
One more click. There we go. Yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much, Yvonne, for the warm introduction, and thank you, ACG Silicon Valley, that even in extraordinary times, you have this amazing commitment to timely thought leadership. So to everyone else, buckle up, because we have a very, very ambitious topic to tackle in under 1 hour. So we're going to dive right in, and I would like to start with this quote by Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, who said, "Ironically, in a changing world, playing it safe is one of the riskiest things you can do." I invite you all to keep this quote in mind as we dive through the presentation. So, are you in the right place? Well, we identified 5 critical areas with reasons for concern right now that if you reframe your approach in these 5 areas, your company will really benefit in the long run. Number 1 is pivot. And yes, this is the buzzword of the last couple of months, but what I mean is that you acknowledge that we won't be going back to same old anytime soon, if ever, and desperately holding on to the old ways of working or even patching things up in the short term to make it work during the current circumstances is going to complicate rather than facilitate. We're not looking to do things differently. We're not looking to do things better. We are looking to do things differently. Number 2, systems. If you haven't noticed already, you need systems, more systems, better systems, optimized systems, because you may be managing remote teams or hybrid teams, or even people who are straddling both indefinitely, and you're committed to make it work. And without systems, and maybe you've experienced it already, we're going to go for inefficiency and chaos in no time flat. Number 3, company culture. And this is a little bit broader than the name first indicates, but you want your people not just to feel safe on the job, but you also want them to be happy to be there and be productive wherever they are working. And this will require an extra touch moving forward. Number 4, employee retention. You may be playing with employee layoffs rather than employee retention right now, but let's be real here. Your A players, you want them to stay and you want them to stay engaged. And also the new work circumstances may have shifted the productivity between people a little bit, and it requires some extra attention to make sure that the right people are still in the right place. And then of course, finally, revenue. We got no business and no company without revenue. So how the heck do you preserve your bottom line while competing and doing business in a market and an economy as right now is riddled with uncertainty? Olivier?
Yeah, so that is definitely a lot to take in, and you're all leaders, so you're dealing with that every day. So our small contribution, hopefully by the end of this, is that you will at least with us have continued. If you haven't already started it, you will start it. The conversation and asking the questions so that you can get to clarity, structure, and impact. And it's really about, in those times that are unusual, it's actually an opportunity to take a step back and gain deeper insights into what we're learning in how we function ourselves as leaders, how we function with our teams, how we think about business environment, how we think about the company environment, both physical and emotional. And so that's hopefully the journey we'll take you on today, is to augment what you're already thinking and maybe start a conversation around not just the questions to ask, but also how to leverage what's happening right now and that step back I mentioned, so that the future can look even brighter. So let's go to the next one, Sieglinde, if you don't mind. So let's set the tone for what we define as dynamic leadership. As the name indicates, this is essentially a different way to think about it, is innovation in action, except that it's innovation that is somewhat focused on one topic. Dynamic leaders, when things happen, are not trying to maintain what was, but are trying to figure out a better what will be. And that requires an open mind. That requires actually looking for opportunities and then seeing them, and then follow that with action. Because in the end, what is going to matter to the success of any company is your people, is your customers. And I worked for a long time for Intuit, the maker of TurboTax and QuickBooks. And what I loved about that company is their framework, their equation for success. And in the end, Sieglinde mentioned it, revenue is definitely one of the things that we all care about. We have to. That's what being in business means. Here's the equation that Intuit uses. Happy employees plus happy customers equals happy shareholders. And so today, I'd say we'll focus on the first two, knowing that when you do those things right, the third part happens. And now it's back to you, Sieglinde.
Thank you, Olivier. So within our 5 critical areas of concern, as I like to call it, we identified 3 categories on which to put your extra focus right now. And section 1 is the people, obviously, because high performance teams start on the individual level. And so I have a question for you. Are your people, whoops, I have a poll here in front of me. Please answer the poll. So I have a question for you. Are your people okay? And for that matter, are you okay, or are you just hanging in there? This really isn't a frivolous question, because pre-pandemic data estimates that the annual cost of job stress for US businesses exceeds 300 billion a year. That was pre-pandemic. I can only imagine what that number is right now, with people experiencing extra stress and extra duress. So without veering into in-depth workplace therapy sessions, how can we tackle this in the quickest and easiest way? So first of all, as a rule of thumb, framing change and innovation as a chance to experiment and learn will always give you a much better rate of success than telling your people, this is it, the pressure is on, right? So then 3 simple ways to add on to that is, first of all, self-care. For you and for your people, this is no longer a luxury, this is a necessity, because if you run ragged, you're no good to your people nor your company, and the same goes for them. Related to that, work from home hygiene. Now that work life and home life are so blurred, we need boundaries and be really strict about them for you, but also you may want to encourage your team to implement clear boundaries, because even in the short term, you're really pleased with this overperforming employee who keeps delivering the results. If this person can't shut up, can't close their laptop at night or over the weekend, they're gonna go for burnout in no time. And then where does that leave you? And the number 3, dare to ask the question, what is it that you need and what is it that your team needs to get all fired up again and ready to tackle your work and team responsibilities? Is it technical support? Is it logistical support? Is it other support? Just open the conversation. So for the manager, I would say, especially in a time right now, the observer position is the power position. As Olivier already mentioned, take a step back. I know there's short-term fires to put out, but at the same time, carve out time to take a step back, look how things are going, analyze, evaluate, then ask or take action on what you need, execute. For the individual team members, turn this into an invitation to collaborate on innovative solutions for engagement and interaction. Open the dialogue, if possible, one-on-one conversation. You want maximum buy-in, and you will get that more easy when you come to agreements on check-ins, deadlines, critical paths, instead of just having a top-down implementation across the board. And then number 3, the team as a unit. How do you deal with the physical separation while still fostering unity, productivity, and community? So far, we've all been handling that as good as possible in the short term, but if we need to veer this in the long term, what does that look like? We may have to go back to the drawing board for that. So let's look at a few specifics that we can tackle here. So first of all, in general, intention, I have to remove the poll question again. Intention trumps happenstance. You need to be way more direct in reaching for that team unity and that community. So one of the things is new agreed upon routines. As I just mentioned, instead of just top-down implementation across the board, go for maximum buy-in by agreeing upon how to move forward and how to make it efficient and best for everyone involved, especially your company. Number 2, your traditions, birthdays, new team member welcome, highlighting exceptional individual accomplishments. They matter now more than ever, but how are you going to continue them in the virtual world? They may need to be reinvented or revised and still have that same impactful power. Number 3, your rules of engagement in virtual meetings. Oh my goodness, we can only stomach so many Zoom meetings a day. So how can we make them more efficient and more effective and not just time on the clock without getting anything done? This serves no one. So some virtual protocols need to be put in place here. Related to that, more than ever before, the difference between extroverts and introverts. First of all, by now, most introverts have learned how to speak up and add value to physical meetings. But what happens in the virtual meetings? Will they feel more empowered, or will they prefer to lurk in the shadow? At the same time, and this is not as clear cut as I'm going to say it right now, but also introverts may be thriving in working from home right now and outperforming any of the past productivity that you're used from them. And extroverts may really be struggling because they need that face-to-face interaction to perform to the best of their ability. And again, it's not as clear cut as I just said here, but it does require some attention right now. And then, of course, Slack is not the new digital coffee maker, and you can no longer rely on open office floor plans and the snack cabinet for random, spontaneous, or coincidental collaboration opportunities. You have to schedule them and still keep some level of spontaneity going, something to think about. I also added in here psychological safety. Do you have a space for open conversations without backlash? I'm talking about health concerns, but also people in your company who are under additional family stress right now. And let's add to that discrimination or racism issue. Do you have a space where, and do you have an appropriate format for them to voice these concerns without backlash? And of course, all of this is intended to foster that community, because the stronger your community, the better your company will veer into the future. Olivier?
Yeah. Speaking about separation, the thing we actually want to achieve is the opposite, and that's keeping the connection. And I've been working with a bunch of companies, and some are much more adept at finding ways to make it work than others. So just in terms of thinking about tips on that particular topic, I think that in times like these, truly being intentional, and maybe you're where you were before, but you need to add another layer on top of that. And if you weren't really because your culture was just kind of happening and you didn't need to, now is definitely the time to be intentional about keeping that connectivity, that connectedness between folks in the team. Just like any strategy, it starts with what you're solving for, right? Within your company, within your leadership style, what's the objective you're trying to accomplish with keeping your people connected? And you may not get it right the first time. So just like any marketing test, you put it out there, you ask for feedback, you iterate, and it becomes better and crystallizes and gels over time. Some things I've seen work, and those are very tactical, and I'll admit to that, but virtual happy hours. People don't get a chance to leave the office together and go grab a coffee, go grab whatever their drink of choice is. But you can still make it happen. And I've been in so many virtual happy hours where folks finally have an outlet to have conversation about what's going on in their lives. None of the meetings during the day really create that platform. It's also important that, especially when you have star employees, they continue receiving the feedback and the accolades for what they do on a daily basis, especially since now they're doing it in an environment that they had to adjust to very quickly. Just last week, the CEO of Intuit organized a fireside chat. That's the name that they used. And it's not necessarily on a work-related topic. Last week, it was about the riots and how African Americans are being treated. And it's important to give an opportunity to, I call it your tribe, your team, to understand where you stand, what your thoughts are, how you're feeling. It's okay as a leader, and actually it's good as a leader to feel, to be, and show that you're vulnerable, and then invite others in that conversation. It's also important for leadership, especially in times like this, to have some tops-down communication. It's not about telling people how to feel, telling them what to do. It's about sharing what you as a leadership team are doing, what you stand for, and what the plans are to address some of the societal issues that we're dealing with. And then, that's the tops down. It's called role modeling. And then the bottoms up is really about inviting people to share how they're feeling. And yes, there's many tools. And to Siglinda's point, Slack's not the new water cooler where you're going to randomly meet somebody. So you really go back to the top point, be intentional about actually keeping that connectedness. So let's move on to, so now that we've talked about the people, let's talk about a little bit about the environment, because that environment has a crucial impact on their morale and their performance. So let's just get into that. Let's just dive with both feet. Okay, so when we talk about environment, we talk about three things. Culture, the way we work together, and then the physical environment. And I warned you early on, this is more going to be about starting the conversation and asking questions to kind of unpack what the current situation is and what you want it to be in the future. And I think now more than ever, leaders must ask themselves two questions. The first is, will the way we worked in the past work just as well now or in the future? And the second, just as important, will employees come back to work with a different set of expectations? I mean, for likely a year almost, 4 months from now, but it doesn't seem like the end is near, people will have had zero commute. The ability to go to their own fridge, pick their own food is here and now. So the question then becomes, well, do you know what that will look like at your company? Are you willing to make changes and adjust so that your people can perform at their best? And do you have a sense for what their expectations are developing to be and what they will be when they come back? So now let's talk about culture. First topic, let's move on. I like questions, as you can tell already. And I like the ones that push us a little bit outside of our comfort zone. If you think about, the Target logo, in the center is your comfort zone. That's how you've operated. That's where you feel good. You're kind of used to that environment. You take out one circle outside of that, and you have the learning zone. That's when you're a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but that's when you grow. And then the last one, which I recommend you avoid putting your employees in or yourself in, is the panic zone. That's when you're so far out of your comfort zone that you're just freaked out and you just lose it and you can't operate anymore or make progress. So now, if you haven't defined your desired culture, most likely the type of people you hire will mold the culture. Not necessarily the way you want or like it to be, but that's just going to be reality. The other option is you hire people who are accretive to the culture that you want to bring to life, because you have defined what that culture is going to be, and therefore that helps you find the right folks to add to the team. So let's move on to the next step here. There's a lot of words in there, and I'm not one of those who will read every word, because you'll have the presentation afterwards and you can go back through over that. I think the main point of all of this, in my mind, is really evolving from an organic culture to an intentional building of the company culture. That includes leadership behavior and role modeling. Just like a child who sees his mom or his dad do certain things in a certain way and then emulate them, the same is true, and I want to be demeaning to the people as call them children, but the same is true in terms of looking up to role models. And you are the role models that people will emulate. The second is having intentional company values that guide the desired behaviors and shape the culture. The values need to be aligned to the culture and the way people behave. They're the guiding post that will get the right behavior out, but also the measuring stick by which bad behavior that negatively affects the culture can be rooted out or addressed. And then what action you take to support and enhance the culture that you want to create. So next, beyond culture, the way we work together. Well, the whole topic today is about dynamic leadership. It's not about dynamic management, right? So what's the difference between a leader and a manager? And you have a few examples on here. I'm only going to bring out or focus on a couple. The first is big picture leadership versus micromanaging. Now, we've all been in a situation where we have teams and we feel quite comfortable being able to walk around the office and make sure that people work. Make sure their screen is not on Netflix, but rather on the next presentation we need them to work on, right? Right now, that's kind of difficult. So of course you could say, well, I'm gonna implement this software that tracks clicking on the screen and which software they're in and the fact that they're reading their emails and all that. The thing is that what you want the culture to be? Is it going to be about your ability to control or your ability to trust that the people are doing their job? And that brings us to the second point, which is how are you measuring, how are you enabling that trust? And I think the main question here is, well, are your folks still delivering results, still measuring their progress against their goals, still meeting their timelines, driving those new customers? And isn't that more important than making sure that they are working their 40 hours? I mean, what if they could do all that in 20? The question is, would you be okay with that? And then the other is really, as I said, the current times we're experiencing is an opportunity for innovation in action. So if that's the case, then what are we doing for ourselves and the people we work with to help develop these new strengths that go beyond adaptability, but really will make us better in the future, will make us even better in the future by not being stuck in the past. And now I'm going to hand that back to Sieglinde, who's our artist extraordinaire and has tons of ideas on the physical environment.
Well, thank you, Olivier. So Olivier just covered the mindset environment and then in the way in which we're going to work together within that mindset environment. But then there's always the physical environment as well. We've all had a chance to work from home now, mandatory. And obviously this is like almost outdated, but do your employees and do you have the proper equipment? A lot of companies provided stipends and then deliveries for the proper equipment for employees home, but it actually goes a little bit beyond that. And I will tell you a really brief anecdote that really struck me. It was an interview with a CEO out of New York. And he said one of his employees just couldn't wrap her head around working from home in her 40-plus-year career. That had never happened. And she just wanted to go back to the office, even though the office was under lock, right? And so not only did they have to order the equipment for her, then somebody had to go to her house, install the equipment, set up a work environment, a work office, work from home office for her. And then even somebody else had to come in and train her in the new platform. And then within no time, she was back up to her rock star, superstar performance. But again, this is probably outdated and you've noticed it, but if the work from home continues, let's make sure that, it's not just haphazardly put together. Number two, It looks like we'll be supporting teams that combine both in-office and remote workers, and even employees straddling both. So what are the virtual protocols? We don't need to repeat them. We already talked a little bit about it. I would say pay attention to best practices, not what the latest expert wrote down in an article in Forbes magazine, but the best practices that make sense for your company, your culture, and your people, and to get to your goals, obviously. And then also I did highlight, and maybe this is redundant because we are in high-tech Silicon Valley, but what about virtual safety protocols to safeguard your sensitive information? Because of our high-tech environment, we're kind of used to that already, but I want to highlight that it's not because you have these protocols that you have them in place that your employees are actually properly using them. So it may need a little bit of extra training, mandatory training, even if it's just a video, pre-recorded video that they have to check off that they watched it, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And then number 3, oh my God, this must be my favorite. It's new office layouts. Some people thrive working from home and they want to do this forever. Like Olivier said, the zero commute, having your own fridge, and other people are dying to get away from their kitchen table or their, bedroom office. But here's the thing. Just implementing the new safety regulations without paying attention to the vibe and the flow and the energy of your space will effectively kill productivity. Because some retail stores have already shown us, right? It's just gloom and doom and they're chasing you out. So you want to make sure that employees don't just feel safe when they do come back or choose to come back into the office, but they're also happy to be there because you want them to perform at their best. So especially as an artist, I have a lot to say about that because I did quite a bit of research on the importance of visual balance to create healthy environments to live and work. And I could talk about this for another hour, so I'll keep it short. But the bottom line is that achieving visual balance, which then helps that energy, vibe, and flow in your space, visual balance in essence brings peace because it relaxes the brain, it lowers the stress level, subconscious stress, by the way. And when your stress level lowers, it inspires the mind. So you could be more productive. Don't we all want that? So let's move on to the next one before I really get on a tangent here. So our third and final refocus topic in our 5 areas of critical areas of concern is the dynamic leadership, because high profitability is only achieved when the right team in the right environment experiences great leadership. And you know what, instead of feeling the pressure of dynamic leadership and saying like, uh-oh, now what, I would say, this is about opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. What do I mean by that? First of all, in times of uncertainty, we're in it, leaders focus on the freedom to do things differently, not the pressure to do things differently. Number 2, in times of transition, we're in it, leaders focus on the big picture and they keep an open mind on how to get there, because we always have way more choices and possibilities than we think we have. We just need to know where to look for them and how to get them. And number 3, Olivier already mentioned this, dynamic leaders are action oriented, because let's face it, change is unsettling. There's no ifs or buts about it, but change does get easier when you take charge and you direct it, even if you think you cannot. So 3 quick things to highlight here. First of all, planning. Of course, short-term, long-term, it doesn't matter. Planning needs to be done, but I want to highlight here that a razor-sharp focus on where you want to go, and then counterintuitively, extreme flexibility on how you're going to get there is what's going to bring you the resilience to be successful and as bulletproof as you can for these violent external circumstances down the road. Number 2, we already mentioned it, so we're not going to reiterate too much of what we said, but the power of clear expectations and effective communications. I highlighted the invitation for dialogue, the agreements for maximum buy-in, and obviously the clarity on what is expected in terms of deadlines, check-ins, critical paths. We all need to be looking in the same direction towards that goal. I also want to highlight a little bit in terms of team strength. It is important also here to keep motivations high, because remote teams may start to feel a little disconnected from their work purpose other than the coveted paycheck. And we want to make sure that they keep seeing that bigger vision of their contribution to the team and to your company. And then I will add a few words about crisis communications in a few slides down. And then number 3, of course, we already touched upon it briefly, but optimizing your team. Who are your A players now? Are they doing the task that they do best given the new work dynamics? And in short, are the right people in the right place given the new operational and performance that's going on in your company? So planning, I'm sure that as leaders, you're all veterans in it by now. So the only thing I want to add here is, how do you leverage the current change, transition, and uncertainty to your benefit in the long run, instead of having this as this unfortunate blimp on your radar, right? So first of all, as Olivier highlighted, what lessons are we getting out of this year? Self-reflection, look back. What are the learnings from these recent months that should be incorporated or can beneficially incorporated into how you run your business into the future? Short term, take visible action. As we are all at home and at work adjusting to this ever evolving new normal, what are you doing differently, and does it work? And then of course, do more of what works. It's this cliche, but let's do it. And then of course, long-time preparedness. What will you do to get your organization ready to face the next crisis, whatever it is? And this may be the second wave of Corona, the third wave of Corona, or whatever else, is going to come up next. We seem to be in for a wild ride these days. And then this recipe for success is actually derived from a little bit of Steve Jobs' inspiration, who said, you decide on what you want to create, and then you reverse engineer on how to get there. But the same goes for goal setting. And if you work from your goal, so you have your goal, and then you reverse engineer on what you need to do today to get there, and then what you need to do tomorrow to get there, will have a higher success rate than if you just work towards that goal. And then very quickly, a few words on crisis communications. This again could be a whole session in itself, but there's 5 tips I want to give you, 5 ways to lead and communicate during a crisis, because this is still a crisis. The first one is so obvious. It is be present, visible, and available. Number 2, seek credible information. And hey, this is not so clear cut these days, because what is the credible information when even your trusted sources contradict each other, and even the experts at this moment can't agree on what is going on exactly and what needs to be done? So obviously there are the health directives to follow and take those into account, but also beyond that, connect the dots and decide and do what's right for your company and your team. Just be prepared that when you make the decision, you are able to explain why you made that decision. And number 3, be very careful on be very mindful on how you're going to communicate this decision and the why to your people. That completely led me into my 3rd point here: be mindful of the communication channels you use. Not every communication is appropriate to be done with a company-wide email. So you may have to be a little bit more creative there to make sure that the right message is conveyed, and that people didn't just hear it, but they actually get it and they're with you. Number 4, be transparent on how the company handles the situation. Seriously, we don't want to invite gossip in the now virtual hall rooms, or just one person's uncertainty that all of a sudden creates this avalanche among your team. Just nip it in the bud as much as you can. And number 5, perhaps a little bit surprising, but please confirm with legal about potential pitfalls in your communications. Quick example. Say that you announce to your company that everybody over 60, which is considered to be in a high risk group right now, should work from home. You do this with the best of intentions and with their safety in mind. However, you just trampled a lot of anti-discriminatory laws. So by all means, check with legal. It will save you so many headaches later on. So this is obvious in communications, and especially in crisis communications. Empathy and authenticity are key. And I also added in the self-awareness here. And why am I saying that? Because you know what? We're all a little fearful right now to some extent, and we all have our freak out moments. But when you lead, just make sure that it's your own fear or your own insecurity or your own stress is not driving you into these communications, so you don't just project it on your team. Olivier?
Yes. So, all right. So definitely very broad topic. Lots of ways to boil the ocean. So right now, in terms of optimizing your team, simple question in my mind, if you, once again, take that position of taking a step back and you assess how people are performing. You had your A players when everybody was in the office. You had your other players. How are the A players behaving right now? Are they just as accretive to the remote situation as they used to be in person in the office? And are you noticing any others who are actually doing better than you expected? And that's what I think about in terms of A players versus rising stars. And so what do you do about that? Like, how do you think, based on these observations and people behaving differently, how will you make what works now continue to work in the future? How will you continue to get the most, and it sounds selfish, but you'll know what I mean, get the most out of your people, right? I'm not talking about, draining them. I'm saying, how can you help them be the best version of themselves in the future based on your observation in a time of change? And so let's talk a little bit about next step, because we like insights, but we like them even more when they're actionable. So what are we going to do differently about today, after today? We talked about looking back, self-reflection, whatever learnings you might have experienced during this time, and bring those forward. Bring those forward, second keyword of the day, I think, intentionally. What have you observed right now? That's right behind the poll, that will help you be even more successful in the future. And then once you're clear in your head and you've brought in people to contribute to those ideas, because they might have had a different experience. They might have noticed different behaviors. Bring them in to get the buy-in. And then once you get to the point where you're clear about what you feel the best roadmap is moving forward based on your thoughts, as well as input from others, be transparent about what you plan on doing so that the entire organization can travel with you on this path and help you make it a reality, as opposed to feeling like they're the dog being dragged on a leash to a park where they don't want to go. So before we go to the next slide for Sieglinde, just keep in mind that if you have any questions on any of what we've covered, feel free to go in the chat and put them in, and the lovely ACG folks will try to weed through all of them and ask them at the end.
Thank you, Olivier. So we just dumped a whole lot of information on you in record speed. At least I do, because I tend to talk fast. And as a visual person, I like visual summaries, because then the whole amount of information can be structured in my head. So here's my visual summary for you. We just gave you, okay, hold on, poll. We just gave you 5 critical areas of concern to reframe to get to goal clarity. Then we gave you, within those 5 areas, we gave you 3 categories to refocus on to get structural balance in your company. And of course, why would you even bother paying attention to all those things? Because we want to make sure that you're setting yourself up with the biggest ROI. And regardless of what's happening right now, your company can lead to sustainable impact down the road. And as I mentioned before, get yourself as bulletproof as possible to these external circumstances. Within the ROI, I would like to repeat real quickly, think big picture. Train talent keepers, not just people managers. Learn from this disruption and vow never again. I exaggerate here, but in as far as that is possible. And then we didn't come here to give you short-term solutions. Instead, we want you to start drafting your long-term yet flexible plan by opening the door to the numerous questions and areas where you can reframe, refocus to get your biggest ROI. And with that, we have arrived to the Q&A. I do want to say real quickly, in addition to the Q&A that will follow, Olivier and I want to extend the invitation to you. How can we support you? Perhaps you want to take a screenshot of this slide so we have our contact info. We'd love to talk to you and learn more about your needs. And if we can help you, we will connect you to someone who can. Thank you so much. Yvonne, back to you.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I definitely learned a lot. I don't have anybody in the chat as of now who has posted a question. Does anybody have a question they would like to ask?
We overwhelmed them. Or they're all eating lunch.
So, no questions. Well,
should I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess you did overwhelm them, gave them enough information that there are just no follow-up questions.
Actually, I do see a question here from, and it said, ensure your A players are the best version of themselves. Do you have any how? Olivier, I think this is one for you.
Right, can you repeat that? Because I was looking at the chat and I didn't listen to you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Ensure that your A players are the best versions of themselves. Do you have any how?
It's a broad question. I would say that, having grown up a marketer, the best response ever, it depends. Yes, there is a how. And the how depends on your A player and also the type of manager you are or the type of manager they have. It's not a one size fits all. Companies that have a culture of wanting to help their employees grow tend to have a pretty solid infrastructure and resources to make that happen. Now, whether you're an A player who's becoming a star or whether you're an okay employee who wants to become an A player. And so there's no one size fits all. I think it's really all about the mindset of, are you in a culture and are you building a culture where employees plus customers equals shareholders are happy? Is your focus on the employees to help them grow so that they can perform at their best? And yes, if the answer is yes, then there's plenty of programs that you can put in place, dynamics you can put in place to help everyone at the company advance to become a better version of themselves. Not all will reach the same heights, but they will all progress. And they'll probably look back on that experience as being one of the best companies they've worked for.
Yes, and I would like to add to that, as I said in one of the earlier slides, where are your people okay? Especially if you see an A player or somebody that was your A player before all of a sudden, you know, lose track a little bit, open the conversation and just ask them what they need from you to perform at their best. Open the dialogue and get this one-on-one agreement going. It takes a lot of time and effort, but there is always like an exponential return on that one.
And there's
Okay.
was just posted, Yvonne.
I do have another question. There's so many sites with return to work guidelines. Which one do we refer to?
I got no answer for that one because it's chaos out there. You know, this is like, do your research and inform yourself. First of all, go to the government sites for the health directives. I mean, if nothing else, you have to follow those. But apart from that, this is where you do research and you make those decisions that are right for you. Because also keep in mind, so as an economist who like extensively studied all these models and predictions and whatever else, by now they leave me so unfazed and so disappointed, because have you noticed in the last few months what was true today is no longer true tomorrow, and the data of today all of a sudden were false 3 days later? I mean, what are you going to rely on to build your company on? You can't make decisions on quicksand, and right now there's a lot of quicksand out there. So I'm sorry for the extra effort, but do the research first of all, follow the governmental guidelines, and then do what makes sense for you. And then as my personal pet peeve, I would say, make sure that it's not just about the guidelines, but it's also about the energy and the vibe and the flow to make sure that your employees are not just happy, but also safe.
And keep in mind
not just safe, but also happy. Sorry.
Keep in mind that the rules actually change, sometime as narrowly as by school district. So, you know, that's why it's hard, and there's not a simple answer. Definitely federal, then state, then county, and then even sometimes down to the school district. So it's unfortunately a lot of research to do, but there's no general good answer to one source of truth. And I had a question here about whether any of the strategies we discussed today differ for startup companies versus larger companies. And so I just want to address that very briefly. I don't think that they do fundamentally. However, there tends to be a difference in the types of people who work at a startup versus a large company. I don't want to generalize, but there's an archetype that feels a lot more comfortable with uncertainty than others. And in startups, the uncertainty is part of what the company is all about. So you might actually be in a better place when you're dealing with uncertain times and uncertain future, because you might already have folks who are comfortable, or are more comfortable at least, with uncertainty. So I think that fundamentally the strategies remain the same. I think the approach remains similar based on company culture, leadership style, etc. But startups might actually have a leg up on large corporations where people might have worked for the last 20 years and not known anything else. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, the flexibility, the razor sharp focus, as well as the flexibility on how to get there, is going to get you the resiliency you need to get to that next level. I also see any ideas on the new office layouts. That's kind of an interesting question to just answer just like that. And I have a hard time just telling you that without seeing the office space, other than health guidelines that you have to implement. But I would say, if anything, because right now we are in such a challenging time of this human connection, like being trampled with, that if, you know, we just talked a lot about the people and how people work together. It's like whatever, going back to the office or new office layout, I would say, like, really as this overall beacon, keep the humanity of it in mind. in as much as possible. We do need the connection, and we do need to feel like we're not all of a sudden the enemy because we could infect somebody else, or we have to be in these like I don't know, turn into Marshmallow Man, you know. So like we're in our own safety bubble. I mean, it's not helping. So I would say keep the humanity in mind, no matter what you do. And if you would like to talk about new office layouts for you particularly, we'd be happy to do that. I mean, you will get the slide deck. Our contact information is in there. Happy to brainstorm with you. Anything else?
Any more questions? Well,
I gotta thank you. You're welcome.
Well, I want to thank you, Sieglinde and Olivier, as well, for the interesting presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, every participant will receive a link to our LinkedIn group that we created, so you can continue asking your questions. You can contact Sieglinde and Olivier directly with the information they've given you. And I wanted to thank you once again to spending an hour with us. And I hope that you will continue to support ACGSV and our events, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, everybody.